The morning broke slow over the water, a pale haze clinging to the training field where sound seemed to dissolve before reaching the horizon. Lena Gray stood apart from the others, her boots pressed into the damp earth eyes, fixed on the distant ridge where targets waited invisible through mist. She had been awake since before dawn, not because she needed to be, but because sleep carried questions she no longer wanted to ask. She breathed in steady measured rhythm, her hands still her focus. Complete, yet somewhere behind her laughter rose quiet. At first, then sharper, bouncing through the fog as though the air itself was in on the joke, and she said nothing, choosing instead to listen to how the laughter broke apart when the wind changed direction. They had watched her arrive days ago, a civilian among trained operators, someone whose name meant nothing on paper and even less in the field. Briggs, the instructor, had said her clearance came from higher up, and that was all anyone needed to know. But that answer only sharpened curiosity. The SEAL candidates whispered her name between drills, testing it the way they tested new gear, with doubt and disbelief. The first time she picked up a rifle, they watched for the mistake they expected her to make. But the mistake never came. Her grip natural, her movements smooth, not perfect, but practiced enough to unsettle them. And though none spoke it aloud, she felt the shift beneath their silence like current, beneath calm water waiting for something to break. Lena moved through the obstacle range with pace that did not draw attention, yet could not be ignored, her timing exact. Her focus detached, the instructors tracked her progress, noting that she never rushed, never faltered. She seemed to exist one step ahead of fatigue, as if she anticipated it before it came. When the others stopped to drink, she stayed moving, her eyes tracing the perimeter, not with suspicion but with calculation. She had learned long ago that observation was survival. That listening often revealed more than asking. Her quietness unsettled them more than arrogance would have, because silence left space for imagination, and imagination could be far more dangerous than words. By the third day, Briggs called her forward to the firing range. The wind stronger now, sweeping sand across the line of targets the unit gathered behind. Watching with that same measured skepticism, he handed her the rifle without comment, his gaze steady but curious, as though searching for something he could not name. She checked the weapon with precision that came from habit rather than training, her movements efficient, minimal, every step without waste. The first round cracked through the fog sound, swallowed almost immediately by the vastness of the field, yet even through the haze the impact was unmistakable. A clean strike center and silent enough to make conversation stop. She lowered the rifle, calmly reset, adjusted her stance as if listening to something. Beyond wind and distance, Briggs signaled for her to continue. 3 more shots, followed each one, measured the rhythm between them, so consistent it felt deliberate, intentional, not mechanical. The group shifted, uncertain whether to be impressed or unsettled. She handed the rifle back, stepping aside without a word, her expression unchanged. She looked neither proud nor surprised, and that absence of reaction unsettled them even more. One of the men asked where she learned to shoot. She turned, her head slightly meeting his gaze without hesitation, and said quietly, long before I learned why the words hung there unanswered as Briggs dismissed the session. Yet the silence she left behind carried longer than any shot could. That evening the camp quieted under dim red light, the sounds of conversation fading as exhaustion settled across the tents. Lena sat outside near the edge of the compound, notebook. Open though her pen moved rarely, the sea wind rustled the pages, her eyes distant. On the horizon, where the last line of light met dark, she had written only fragments, single words, coordinates, sketches of terrain, none complete enough to explain their meaning. A voice broke the stillness, one of the trainees asking why she stayed. Apart. She looked up slow, a faint smile touching her lips. Not of amusement, but of memory. She said some things are easier to see from a distance, and then went back to writing. The trainee waited as if expecting more, but none came, and soon his footsteps faded, leaving her alone again with the wind. The next morning, fog returned thicker than before. Visibility barely past 10 meters. Briggs announced a paired exercise navigation through the ridge line, with minimal equipment, each pair given a single radio link, one map fragment, and coordinates to locate. Lena listened quietly as assignments were given, then noted her name unpaired. Briggs hesitated before confirming it. She would move alone. The others glanced toward her, some in curiosity. Others. In relief, she adjusted her pack, tightening the strap over her shoulder without comment, as if she had expected the choice already. The fog swallowed her steps before anyone could see which direction she took. Time blurred within the gray each direction, identical. Yet Lena moved with certainty, pausing often to listen rather than look the sound of wind against rock, the faint echo of footfall somewhere distant. Not her own, she adjusted course without consulting her compass, following instinct rather than orientation. She had learned years before that direction could be felt like gravity if one stayed quiet enough to hear it. The terrain shifted beneath her feet from soft earth to stone, the temperature dropping slightly. She crouched briefly, tracing the ground, her fingertips brushing something smooth buried beneath sand. Not natural, she uncovered a small fragment, metal cold, engraved faintly with sequence of numbers. The last two familiar matching part of her coordinate set. She pocketed it, rising slow, the fog thickening again around her as though reacting to motion. Somewhere ahead, the faint static of radio transmission cut through the quiet. She turned toward the sound, pressing the receiver against her ear, voices indistinct, clipped by interference, but enough to recognize command not from Briggs but higher. Lena listened motionless as fragments of her own name surfaced in the mix, followed by terms she could not place. It was not about navigation. It was about observation. She realized then that this exercise was not test of skill. It was measurement of response. She lowered the radio, switching channel until the static faded, replaced by silence. And in that silence, she felt again that hum from the day before, faint running through her chest. Rather than the air, hours passed before she reached the ridge, a sharp incline of fractured stone opening into narrow ledge visibility, clearing just enough to see below the valley stretching wide, gray, and endless. She set her pack, down breathing steady, her pulse measured against the quiet. Then from below she heard echo, not voice, not mechanical. Something rhythmic, like footsteps multiplied by distance. She leaned forward, scanning the haze shapes shifting beneath fog. Not quite human, but moving with purpose. She raised the radio again, intending to call in position, but paused, the static too familiar, now layered with tones that matched the rhythm below. She turned it off and weighted each sound from the valley, timed perfectly, with the faint vibration she felt through the stone beneath her boots. The fog thinned slightly, revealing flickers of reflection far below, as though metal caught light for a moment, then disappeared. She adjusted focus, noting patterns too uniform to be chance. She realized then that whatever waited below was not part of the exercise, and yet the coordinates on her map led directly there. She checked again, the numbers aligning perfectly. Briggs had said nothing about structures in this zone, but the absence of information itself felt deliberate. She marked the observation in her notebook, folding the page carefully before standing again. She knew the protocol required return by nightfall, but instinct whispered otherwise. She took one final look at the ridge line, the faint pulse of reflection repeating like a signal, then turned back toward the path she had come. Her footsteps soundless against the stone, each one measured, each one heavier with question, as night began to settle. The fog lifted, fully revealing the field in fragments, pools of light cutting through the dark, the camp visible in distance, small against the horizon. She slowed her pace, senses sharp. Though nothing moved around her, yet the air felt charged, the same way it had before a storm. She could hear faint conversation through her earpiece command issuing recall instructions, but there was something underneath the voice almost imperceptible, a second tone running parallel. She stopped breathing for a moment, isolating the sound, realizing it matched perfectly with the rhythm of her heartbeat. She removed the earpiece, holding it at distance. The tone continued unchanged, the line dead. She reached camp at twilight. The others gathered around the fire, their faces drawn from exhaustion, but their eyes lifted when they saw her returning alone. Briggs approached, wordless at first, his gaze scanning her expression as though searching for confirmation of something he suspected. He asked if she found the marker. She shook her head and said quietly, "Only a reflection." His brow furrowed slightly, then smoothed as he nodded, telling her to rest. She walked past them to her tent, unzipping it halfway before pausing, the wind outside, shifting the canvas. Like a breath behind her, she turned quickly, scanning the shadows. No movement. Only silence yet. That hum returned faint through the ground, as though the earth itself remembered where she had been. She stood there listening until it faded, completely, then closed the tent around her, the darkness settling like thought unfinished. The wind shifted again that night, carrying voices that did not belong to the camp. Lena lay still, her eyes open to the thin line of moonlight through the tent canvas, the voices faint, uncertain. Not language exactly, but pattern rhythmic, as if following. Her breathing, she sat up slowly, listening more intently, the sound blending with the low hum she had felt before, the same tone that had followed her from the ridge. She stepped outside, boots sinking slightly into cold soil, the air heavy with salt. From the nearby sea, she scanned the field. Nothing moved. Yet she knew she was not alone. The fog had returned, drifting low across the ground like thought half-formed and fading. Each breath she took seemed to echo against it. The next morning came. Slow gray light filtering through cloud, the others moved through routine drills, their conversation clipped, filled with tired laughter. Yet beneath it ran unease, the kind that lingered after something unseen had brushed too close. Briggs called, them together outlining the next stage of evaluation. He mentioned the ridge, but avoided her eyes as he spoke. She caught the slight tremor in his tone, the way command voices shifted when they were following orders. They did not understand. She stood, silent, waiting as assignments were given. The team divided into pairs again. But this time, Briggs named her as observer, not participant, a decision that drew glances from every direction, curiosity mixed with apprehension. She simply nodded her gaze. Steady, though, her mind turned over the meaning of the word observer. They moved out before noon, the valley visible now without fog, a pattern of ridges leading into shadowed basin. She watched from the observation post with radio and tablet in hand. The live feed flickering between perspectives, her focus sharp, though each signal carried faint distortion, as if distance alone could not explain the interference. She logged each fluctuation, noting that the intervals matched the hum she had recorded. Days earlier, Briggs approached, standing beside her, his expression unreadable. He asked what she had seen. She answered nothing yet, and that word seemed to hang between them longer than it should. He studied her for a moment, then looked back at the screen as if expecting it to change before his eyes as the exercise unfolded. One signal dropped, then another, until only fragments of voices came through, overlapping with static. Lena adjusted the receiver fine-tuning frequencies until she caught brief phrases, coordinates, confirmation, none of it coherent. Then silenced the last transmission, ending mid-word. She looked toward the ridgeline through field glasses. The terrain still and unchanged, yet she felt the shift in air pressure that came. Before weather turned, the clouds thickened their edges, sharp with color, not gray but faintly metallic, as if light itself had weight. She keyed the radio to Briggs' channel reporting interference. He acknowledged, though his own voice cracked halfway. Through the sentence a distortion that seemed more biological than mechanical. She watched him glance toward her again. This time, not with confusion, but with the faint awareness that comes when coincidence repeats too often to ignore. Hours passed, the remaining feeds showing no movement. She scanned each in rotation, her pulse slow, deliberate, until one camera flickered, revealing frame of image, then darkness. She froze, rewinding the brief second that had registered on screen. A figure standing. Near the basin, not one of theirs too still, too centered. She zoomed closer, but the detail dissolved into noise. She captured the frame, nonetheless storing it on backup drive. Briggs leaned forward, asking what she saw. She told him to look. But when he did, the image was gone, replaced by static. She replayed the clip, yet the system displayed error, log corrupted. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair, muttering about faulty optics. She said nothing, but her eyes remained on the screen. Because even after the image vanished, the faint outline persisted like burn mark against vision. By nightfall, the sky changed again, a strange gradient of light spreading along horizon. Without clear source, the air electric enough to raise hair along. Her arms, Lena packed her equipment, preparing to return. But Briggs halted her, saying command wanted full report before any withdrawal she could hear in his tone, that the order came sudden, unexpected. She asked for reason. He hesitated, saying only, observation to continue until signal returns. She wanted to argue, but something in his eyes made her stop. Not fear exactly, but the kind of uncertainty that borders recognition. He handed her an auxiliary power pack, told her to keep monitoring, and left heading toward the command trailer, the door closing behind him with sound sharper than wind. She stayed watching the monitors, their glow reflecting faintly against her face, each screen pulsing at different rhythm. She synchronized them manually, aligning feed delays until a pattern emerged. The interference resolved into structured timing, repeating sequence of 4 pulses, pause, then 5 longer ones. She recognized it immediately. Not coincidence, but designed the same intervals that had echoed. In her heartbeat since the ridge, she whispered the sequence aloud, matching it to the rhythm within her chest, and felt the air around her vibrate almost imperceptibly. She switched cameras again, focusing on the farthest field feed, and froze, the ridge illuminated by faint light. Though the sky above remained dark, and within that light, something moved. The shape impossible to define motion, too smooth to belong to weather. She leaned closer until her breath fogged the screen. The lights blinked. Out across the compound, one after another, the hum returning louder, resonating through metal framework of the station. She stood still, listening. It was not sound, but presence. The same one she had felt in the valley, only stronger. Closer she turned. To the radio calling Briggs twice, 3 times, no reply. Only silence thicker than before. She stepped outside, the air colder now. Wind still, her eyes adjusting to darkness, where faint shimmer lingered near the ridge, a slow oscillation like breathing. She started walking toward it, every instinct warning her to stop, yet curiosity overriding caution, the distance shorter than it had appeared from the monitors, each step amplifying the hum until it coursed through her bones. She reached the first rise of the ridge and paused, looking down into the basin where faint lines of light traced symbols across the ground, each one pulsing faintly in rhythm. Her breath caught the sight, both mesmerizing and impossible. The shapes, geometric yet organic. Shifting as though alive, she crouched, tracing one faint line with her gloved hand, and felt warmth pulse through her skin, the vibration traveling up her arm. Steady, deliberate, she withdrew quickly, heart hammering, not in fear, but in recognition. This was what the numbers on the metal fragment had pointed toward. Not coordinates, but sequence. She stood backing away, slowly, her gaze sweeping the basin for any sign of movement, then heard faint static from her pocket. The radio activating by itself. a whisper breaking through her name stretched drawn out by distance. Not Briggs, not command, a voice she could not place, yet one that carried the same cadence as her own. She lifted the radio, answering softly, asking for identity. Silence followed. Then a single phrase, returning fragmented but clear enough, "Come back." She repeated the words into air. Come back, where no answer, only echo her own voice doubled by distortion. She lowered the device. The light patterns across the basin shifting again, faster, more chaotic as though reacting to sound. She stepped backward, the hum intensifying until it filled her head, pressure building behind her eyes. She closed them, focusing on breath, grounding herself. The noise subsided, replaced by heartbeat. Steady, strong. The patterns slowing again, resuming their earlier rhythm. She opened her eyes slowly, the air still charged, but calm, as if nothing had happened. The basin now quiet, only faint afterglow left behind. When she returned to camp hours later, dawn had begun to touch the horizon, faint orange bleeding through gray. She found the compound lights' restored systems running, monitors blank as though reset. Briggs stood near the trailer, his expression heavy with exhaustion when he saw her, said nothing for a long moment, then asked what she found. She looked past him toward the ridge where fog had begun to gather again, and replied only reflection. The word hung in air between them, the same word she had used before, and he nodded slowly. As if he already knew, she asked about the others. The missing transmissions, he hesitated, then said, "Command classified the data pending review." She could tell from his tone he had been instructed not to ask further. Lena walked to the edge of the field, her mind replaying the pattern, the voice, the hum. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the metal fragment again, the engraving, faint but visible. She held it to the light, tracing the sequence with her thumb. 3 short, 2 long, repeating, like heartbeat. She turned it over, expecting blank surface, but beneath dirt, a second line revealed itself. Inscription too faint to read completely, but enough letters visible to form the start of a word observer. She stood motionless, watching the sunrise stretch across the ridge, the light catching the fragment until it glowed faintly in her palm. She pocketed it again, her pulse slow and steady as the wind carried first sound of the day, the hum distant, yet returning as if the ground itself breathed in answer to her silence. That night she lay awake, unable to rest, the rhythm echoing inside her mind. She knew Briggs would file the report, stripped of anything unexplained. She also knew Command would classify it away, just like every other anomaly. Yet something within her refused to let go of the pattern. The way it aligned with her pulse, the way the voice had matched her own. She turned onto her side, staring at faint shimmer above. The days following the incident blurred together, the air thick with the weight of something unspoken. Lena moved through camp in silence, her eyes always drawn toward the ridge, where fog seemed to linger longer than before. The others avoided that direction, as if instinct warned them to look away. Briggs had grown quieter, too, his usual confidence replaced by a thoughtful hesitation that told her he had seen more than he admitted. She watched him sometimes at night, standing near the antenna, staring into nothing as though waiting for a sound to return, a sound that only the two of them could hear. And when she tried to sleep, the rhythm came back steady inside her chest, matching the pulse of the earth itself. She began keeping notes in the margins of her mission file, strange fragments of memory that surfaced, uninvited coordinates that did not exist. Words she could not translate but somehow understood. She wrote until dawn, each line ending before sense completed the pattern forming, something between message and memory. She stopped only when the hum grew too loud, filling the space between thoughts. She rose, then stepping outside barefoot, the cold ground grounding her until the vibration faded again. She looked at the horizon, where first light met fog, and for a moment she thought she saw movement, not shadow, not light, something between the two. Her pulse quickened, but she did not look away. Command finally sent for her, a transport arriving unannounced, its engines cutting. Through the morning stillness, Briggs delivered the order without meeting her eyes. Reassignment, temporary debrief in the capital. She asked if he would follow. Later, he only nodded, saying someone had to keep the station running, though both knew. The feeds had been silent for days. She packed her gear slowly, the metal fragment tucked safely in her jacket, its warmth faint but constant. She turned to Briggs at the ramp and told him to record the hum. If it returned, he said he would, though. His voice trembled slightly. She boarded without another word. As the transport lifted, the camp shrank below, swallowed by fog that seemed to rise and follow. The flight was long and silent, clouds stretching endlessly below her. The pilot said nothing, eyes fixed ahead as if following invisible line. She leaned back, eyes half closed, feeling the low vibration of engines blend with that familiar rhythm, her thoughts drifting back to the voice that had called her name from static the way it had, matched her own tone perfectly. She wondered if the voice had been warning or invitation. Her reflection faint in window flickered once, as if caught between frames, and for a heartbeat she saw another face overlapping hers, not identical, but close, enough to unsettle the breath within her chest. The engines dipped slightly, pulling her from the thought as the base lights appeared through haze below. She closed her eyes again, steadying breath as the hum grew louder than before.